All right, good afternoon, everybody. I had a couple client calls about this Iranian cyber threat and what does that mean to them. So we wanted to take a little while and just kind of discuss some quick wins, some things you should be thinking about, maybe some things you're not thinking about. Basically, Helms, what kind of infrastructure do you think they're going to target? Who is a prime opportunity target for Iran?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think as we look at this, let's make sure that we caveat that nobody's free of harm here. But I think based off prior experiences, seeing kind of how these threat groups work, I would say critical infrastructure. I would say power grid, right? I would say if you're an energy company of any sort, solar, wind, ONG, pick one, I would say that I would be going to my drawing board to make sure that I have all my ducks in order, to make sure that everything that we've tested and tried is still working, to make sure that I have a disaster recovery plan. I would also, as a financial institute, I would be checking everything to make sure that if I have coverage in my network, that I know what's on it, that I make sure that attackers, that I have a good vulnerability assessment. I'd be checking those. Those would probably be my two biggest ones that I'd focus on. But once again, I think nothing's off limits. And I think if you're a U.S. entity that has any value to cause damage or disruption, I think you're a potential target.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, right? Because we talk about a lot about like, hey, there's a lot of FUD in the industry right now, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? And we certainly don't want to contribute to that, but I think we all agree, right? And I think rightly so that one, Iran is likely to target American interests, right? And that they're also likely to target those using some disruptive capability, right? Traditional cyber espionage, the steal lots of data doesn't make a visible splash in the news, right? So we're anticipating, we talked a lot about this actually, and talked to a lot of clients about this. We're really anticipating destructive cyber attacks, the type of thing you'd see with Shamoon, the type of thing that we saw with NotPetya, and whether or not it has the warming effect of NotPetya is kind of beside the point. We expect that to be basically expect to see some destructive level cyber attacks or certain types of cyber attacks. The entry vector, I think we agree, is probably going to be phishing, right? We've seen a lot of phishing from Iran in the past, and their phishing ranges from really good to really, really bad. Like, hey, my software this picture photo album was created with special software, so you only disable your antivirus before you run it. That's like laughably bad, right? But again, it's worked. That's the thing that's probably worth mentioning. And how do we stop that from working? What do you think there? I mean, the phishing from working. What are you thinking on the security awareness side?
I think it's an employee awareness side, right? Making sure that you don't have everyone running around screaming that their hair's on fire, right? We don't want to arm everyone with a hammer and everything then starts looking like a nail, right? At the same time, if I'm feeling like my security posture, phishing or otherwise, is underprepared, is this the time that I go and buy that new fancy tool that?
Man, I can tell you, I think right now, if you're going to vendors saying, what can I arm myself with tomorrow? And can I install it all tomorrow? I think you'll end up doing more harm than good, because you're going to taint your data lake, right? And you're just going to have all this influx of information coming in. And then your analysts are going to look at you and say, what can I do with this? So definitely, I personally do not recommend that. And this goes for any incident response. I think if you know you already have an intrusion in your environment or you're pretty confident, the last thing I would do is go install a new security product right away. But that being said, some other things we can do, I think this is one of your strong topics you love talking about, which is like threat hunting. Threat hunting, I would start testing my policies. I'd have those analysts going through the data sources, being able to find potential malicious activity.
Right. So that's something that didn't correlate into an alarm,
right?
That sort of thing. Any other thoughts, Jake?
Well, first off, he said data lake, so everybody drink, right? But separate from that, I think that's a great point, right? Threat hunting is the thing. Threat hunting is definitely something we need to look at. We talked a little bit before we got on camera here, talked a little bit about likely targets. We, I think, agree on financial services is likely, maybe a little bit of manufacturing, energy generation and distribution, utilities in general. Any thoughts on where the first salvo is likely to be thrown? Do you think utilities and financial? Do you think, where do you think?
I think utilities is pretty out there. I think utilities, attacking utilities demands a response that's proportionate to that. And I think that's kind of like if a nation state took out some sort of high profile leader on another foreign soil.
Wow.
Right. Wow. I would also like to throw a new curveball in here that people are probably thinking about. should I go into this with a safe assumption that I haven't been breached yet and Iran's going to come breach me?
No,
Okay.
no, my goodness, right? And I think that's a great question, by the way, right? This is something we've talked about extensively, which is that, if you're going to create a destructive effect or a disruptive effect, right? It is unlikely that Iran today, right after the Soleimani killing, stepped back and was like, target that organization over there to conduct destructive cyber attack. That's not the way it works, right? We all know this. We all know that it's very likely that they are going to, as they pick those organizations, and I agree with you, it's probably not going to be utilities initially, right? But probably more financial services, manufacturing, that kind of stuff. I think they'll avoid critical infrastructure initially. But that said, these are organizations they're probably already in, which ties into your thought about threat hunting. It is an absolutely critical piece. And to your thought about deploying additional tools, don't do that, right? Look, use the data you have rather than trying to ramp up. Now, that said, look, if you know that you've got a security, like open to the internet struts from 6 years ago, please take action on that, right? But we're talking about here is not to go out and buy an EDR today because of Iran, right?
We talked about employee awareness, testing those detection rules, making sure your visibility is good there. Do you think that it just applies to those network security teams as well? Do you think it's just a security's problem? Is everyone in that organization a human sensor?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think security tends to own the problem, but I think everybody contributes to both the problem and the solution, right? I know a lot of times we say, hey, user training, and they just send out an email, right? I think user training should go far and beyond. I think that's a giant topic outside of here in general, but at least relevant to here, right? I would say use all sources necessary, right, to be able to solve this.
Yeah, and so on that end, I think something you were getting at there is it's not just a security problem. If we're thinking that we're going to be targeted with a destructive cyber attack, educating the NOC, the Network Operations Center, is probably more important in this case than the Security Operations Center. And I'd like to caveat that with again, we assess that the initial attacks, as it were, are going to be initial cyber attacks from Iran are going to be in networks that they're already in, meaning they've already bypassed defenses. And so this is a spot where saying the SOC be all over it, right? Yeah, that's great advice, right? But you can only pull be at heightened alert so often, right? Before, heck, we were all military, we're force protection condition alpha kind of thing. And it's like it loses its meaning after a while, right? You can only be at high alert for so long. And the question is when to pull that trigger, right? But I think the NOC, realistically, is probably the more important. The attackers already bypassed the network security defenses. Threat hunting, to your point, is huge, right? And the awareness piece ties in both from the phishing as well as alerting the NOC. And then finally, we talked a lot about disaster recovery plans. And we talk a lot about that in general, right? This is a great time. If you've got management that's jumping on you and saying you have to do something, that something for me is going to be, we're going to go and validate, right? Go and validate that our disaster recovery plan works. Because if our DR plan sucks, then that's not a good spot for us to be in. Also, it's a very visible thing that we can do, right? With executive engagement, that you can move that DR plan as big, we're going to tabletop through, right? As big or as little as you need it to be.
Yep. So. And I think the one thing that you emphasized on, right, is the practical piece of this, right?
Yes.
Don't just go there and say, hey, I have a policy that says do a backup. Hey, IT, are we doing a backup? Right? Go test one of those backups. Do you evaluate if your company can support an offsite backup location? I can tell you many times we go to an incident and they say, hey, I lost my backup. The backup doesn't, there's always an excuse, right? If you're able to put mitigations around the safeguards of those backups, do it.
And off camera earlier, and I'm not going to steal your thunder here, Brandon, but off camera earlier, we were talking about remember that ransomware case we worked where the user actually saw, she's like, oh my gosh, badness with the machine. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, downloaded a file, invoices.zip, computer started acting funny, no really reporting policy in place, she didn't know who to talk to, went home for the rest of the day. 14 and a half hours it took for that ransomware to encrypt the network.
Yeah, it was hugely destructive. She was to be fair, she was over provisioned with her account permissions, as executive admins often are. But that was a spot where, she didn't, and I think they'd gone through the motions of, user awareness, whatever, but it was it was such a seminal event because what was so ironically, and it was so tragic, is she left because, right? We talked to her, she's like, I only had 15 minutes left in the day. I left because the computer was having problems and I knew IT couldn't fix it before and get me back up and running. So this is a spot where, they could have easily averted disaster and instead fell right into it. And it just, it's so sad. And that's the That's really the awareness piece, I think.
I think if you're feeling underprepared, contact a security vendor, have them help you out, consultancy, make you feel more prepared this time. You're basically weathering the storm at this point, locking it down ahead of the hurricane, making sure that everything's good to go. Know that Rendition's here for you 24/7, 365, 888-409-5811. You need to go that route as well. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I guess just to wrap up, right? I'm a board member. I'm a C-level executive. I'm leadership of some sort. What are my 3 top concerns that I should focus on?
Top 3, it's exactly what we've already covered, right? It is the awareness piece, right? And that's both at the user side for phishing as well as the particularly help desk, knock. Like, they've got to know, like, that when they hear repeated outages of, like, hey, I've got an outage here, got an outage there, you need to be thinking destructive cyber attack / ransomware, right? The difference in ransomware and a file wiper is whether or not you have a key to recover, really, when it comes down to it. Functionally, right? So that's number 1 is the awareness piece. I think number 2 is threat hunting, right? Again, we've already capitulated that the attackers have breached the perimeter, they're there. And number 3 is the DR plan. That DR plan, if I'm going to do one thing today, that's it, right? And I don't mean that you shouldn't do threat hunting, I don't mean you shouldn't do awareness, but if I have to pick one of those 3, I think the most important thing we can do is that DR plan, because I'm going to assume that we've already done in any organization watching this and thinking about this as a concern, you've probably already done 1 and 2, or at least are doing something around those. I will bet you that DR plan has a lot of dust on it, and I'll bet you that you haven't really exercised restoring files, or remember that email server breach that we worked where they tried to restore and they found out everybody's last name started with F, wasn't getting their mail backed up, and that kind of stuff, right? Obviously is the stuff we want to find out about before an event, right? And so I think the DR plan is, if I have to do a top 3, I know I use it as number 3, but it is because it's the hardest, right? But it's also going to be the most impactful long-term for your organization. Anybody else?
Well, I think it's great. Thanks for the time. I know we got to run, do other calls, more clients, more IRs to fire to help out with.
Tell me about it.
Thanks everyone for your time, and let us know if you have any questions. RenditionInfosec.com.
Peace out.
Thanks.